Sophie.
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to It Can't Be Helped.
We've started counting episode numbers.
And what are we talking about today, Sophie?
We're talking about Requiem from the Darkness.
As I was watching the episode you sent me, my boyfriend glanced at my screen and said, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, No, what are you watching?" And I said, "Requiem from the Darkness." And he said, quote, "Yeah, that's the worst thing I've ever seen."
This is one of the anime that I picked up from the Chinatown area of Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the ones I got from there, they didn't have English dubs. They were just like copies of the Japanese discs.
Mm-hmm.
And this one sort of stuck in my head because when I got it and took it home and put it on, it was actually in English.
We're so sorry to impose on you like this, but the rain started so quickly.
The copyright date was like 2003, I think, it's weird that I hadn't seen it or heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe this just came out in North America? I don't know, but I'd never seen this before.
So, I was a little bit perplexed when you recommended this to me, because normally you recommend good things like Empty Geist.
Mm-hmm. Pat Labor?
No. What's the other anime I'm thinking? Thinking the other one where the guy turns into a big guy. And
Ultraman?
No. And then they say, ooh, and then...
Oh, Cybernetics Guardian.
Yeah, that's a good one. This specific anime, Requiem from the Darkness, you sent me 3 episodes to watch. Mm-hmm. I watched them. Mm-hmm. I was extremely bored. I was unimpressed. I kind of checked out. I honestly can't even tell you what they were about. It's like a mystery, a little murder mystery. And there's 3 characters plus a dude who writes stories. And I think his publisher is a rat, which is the most notable thing about the series. I'm just, Sophie, that's the one that I'm like, I'm not impressed. But so I'm just fascinated to know, why did you recommend it, Sophie?
Well, because the original idea was we were going to watch like a bunch of different horror anime.
Yeah.
This was one of them, and I think it was just randomly the one that was in the folder, and I'm like, we'll start with this one.
But usually in these episodes, you have some interesting background or some process behind the anime. Please tell me more.
Okay, so this is an adaptation of a series of novels by a writer called Natsuhiko Kyokoku. Mm-hmm. You can actually pick them up in English as an ebook for pretty cheap on Amazon. I think they're like $2 each.
Okay.
And he's like a, I guess, semi-well-known mystery and horror author.
Okay.
He's a writer. He doesn't do manga. So like the kind of the designs of the characters and the visual look of this aren't actually informed really by his work.
Okay.
And the purpose of this novel series, I think there's 7 of them, is that he wanted to approach like ghost and yokai stories from a different perspective where the ghosts and the yokai and everything were not actually that central to the plot. The plot was about people, and he wanted to explore the way in which like negative and like harmful human desires and human actions get sort of displaced onto these like mythical sort of folkloric figures. So one of the things about this series is it's kind of split into 2 halves. The first half is based close-ishly on his books. Okay. And those stories, as you maybe picked up on, although it sounds like you stopped paying attention about 5 minutes in, the supernatural element of those stories is either completely secondary or it just straightforwardly didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And it's actually just about the people.
Yeah, you know what it's like? Scooby-Doo.
Yes, that's exactly what that's why I thought we would like it. Because I thought,
I don't like Scooby-Doo. That's the one cartoon I really dislike.
This is anime horror Scooby-Doo. But also it starts with everyone knowing, like, who the murderer is and what they did.
Yeah.
And it becomes about getting them to confess. So it's also horror anime Columbo.
I feel like I should like it as somebody who listens to true crime. I should theoretically like this. But this is more like like CSI Miami or something. It's not very good.
Is it like CSI Miami?
Because it's like zoom in, but they're zooming in on a ghost, and it's like there is no ghost, and then Scooby-Doo comes in, and then they take off the mask. Even the art, at first I was like, oh, it's original, it's interesting, but it was kind of a little bit boring. It's like they were trying to imitate something good. Like, I won't watch Fooly Cooly, but at least like the few seconds I watched were really interesting. They were like well done.
The thing about Requiem from the Darkness, the anime, is it's really fucking cheap.
Ah, okay.
Quite a lot of it is either a still image or like a very short looping piece of animation. But over the top of that, they will render like some fog or some water or some fire or some rain or something to try to give the scene a sense of like movement and life to it that it wouldn't have if it was completely static.
Yeah.
Do you think that worked?
I feel like they did their best.
One of the other tricks that the show uses is that a lot of conversations take place while people are facing away from the camera. There's a lot of sequences where like it's a very basic like 3D set with just like flat cardboard cutout sort of characters on it, and they'll move the camera around that while someone is talking. A lot of the screen is just black. Like, the screen will be this massive slab of black, and then they'll sort of roughly sketch in a background, but the background will, underneath it, have, like, a pattern that looks like someone is painting with ink onto blot paper.
Yeah. None of it worked. Like, the way you're describing it is, like, sounds good, but, like, none of it worked, Sophie. And I tried. I was like, oh, maybe the dullness of the colors is like artistic. No, I guess they just didn't have money for colors. You know what's the problem? I feel like they were lacking people on their team. If they had someone from Zarion, someone from MD Geist, like they would have pulled through, you know what I mean?
So it would have been good if different people had made it, is what you're saying.
Maybe I'm also a little bit mad because I feel like it's a missed opportunity because I love horror. Like,
Yeah.
I literally watch I've seen The Resort when it came out. Do you even know what this is?
No.
You don't. Nobody does. I have seen it when it had no reviews on IMDb. Like, I watched it. It's really bad. I think it was made by influencers as, like, some sort of a vacation. But, like, that's my standards. I'll watch it again, maybe. But, and I don't know.
Do you think it's like the Scooby-Doo aspect that made you switch off?
It was just not intense enough. I think part of it is because I'm really looking forward to Terrifier 3 and have recently rewatched Terrifier 1 and 2 as well as the short movies, and they're very intense. And I feel like, maybe I'm just expecting things that I watched to bring me that type of hype and excitement, and it just wasn't it.
Okay. Should I ask what you thought of the story, or do you not remember it?
It's just like some guy trying to write a bunch of stories about ghosts, and then he hangs out with 3 other people, but they're supernatural. They do the Scooby-Doo thing in their friggin' van, and that's it.
They don't have a van.
Carriage.
Are you confusing this with actual episodes of Scooby-Doo?
Look, it all bleeds in.
Remember the episode of Scooby-Doo where the guy ate a horse? So the premise of Requiem from the Darkness is that there is a writer called Momosuke. Momosuke has basically become a writer as sort of a hobby/passion project because he's inherited his family business and he doesn't really feel like he could run it very well. So he basically just gives it to somebody else and wanders around sort of like living off passive income from a candle shop. And what he's doing currently is he's writing riddles for children. But he thinks to himself, no, what I actually want to do is I want to write this like compendium of horror stories and like compendium of folklore, kind of like the Brothers Grimm or something like that. Like he's going to wander around and he's going to go to all these different places where he hears rumors that there's ghosts and yokai and things, and he's going to like encounter them and write them down, and he'll become this famous like compiler of ghost stories. And what happens in the series is he encounters these 3 mysterious figures who are called the Onyo. And they're led by a guy called Madaichi. So they're sometimes referred to as the Madaichi gang. like you said, they are supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
They are like some sort of weird, like, ghost yokai thing from another world.
Yeah.
But what they are primarily is that they're performers.
Mm-hmm.
Of the trio, there's Madiichi, who's basically like a special effects guy. Like, he can sort of do things with like fire and light and stuff to cast shadows and sort of make things appear to be monsters. There's a big guy called Nagamimi, who is a shapeshifter, but that's presented as he's actually
Mm-hmm.
a brilliant kabuki actor who can just take on the persona of any other being on Earth. And then there's this lady called Ogin,
Mm-hmm.
who is a puppeteer. So she's able to construct and manipulate these puppets. So the three of them together, they're kind of like a traveling visual effects crew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what they're doing is they are sensing and sort of tracking down people who have all this negative karma around them from something terrible that they've done. And they put on a show to drive that person to the point where they will confess what they've done. And Momosuke gets caught up with them because he's also looking for these like weird sort of stories about like, you know, ghosts and like possessed objects and stuff. So the four of them kind of start traveling around together. So like you were saying, the premise is very, very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Probably the clearest example in the three I sent you is the second one. So what happens is
Mm-hmm.
Momosuke hears about this inn that has a willow tree growing in the middle of it. The willow tree has become this sort of self-aware thing, and it's fallen in love with the innkeeper. And every time the innkeeper gets married,
Mm-hmm.
the willow tree manifests as this sort of spirit called the Willow Woman, who then murders the innkeeper's wife. And this has been going on for like a really long time, and his wives keep being killed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Momosuke goes there to write the story of the Willow Woman. The Onyo are there because they know what's really going on, which is that the innkeeper is the one who's actually committing the murders.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out the innkeeper is under a whole lot of pressure from the other people who work at the inn to have a child so that the innkeeper will have an heir. So what's happened is the innkeeper's fear of being replaced by his heir has driven him mad to the point where he is basically suffering a split personality, and he is actually dressing as the Willow Woman to murder his wife over and over and over again. And the story is essentially like the Momosuke half and the Onyo half kind of colliding.
Thank you, Sophie. You made it sound way more interesting and entertaining than the episode itself. I appreciate it.
Okay, the episode is 20 minutes long, so like what about it lost your interest?
It was just 20 minutes too long. They did their best. Sometimes it's just not good enough. Look, we all fail at something.
Do you want to talk about the other two stories, or have you forgotten them?
There was one where somebody killed a kid.
That was the first one. That was the bean washer.
Yeah. I don't remember why he killed the kid. Tell me.
Okay, so the first episode we watched was about this yokai called the Azuki Arai. So an Azuki Arai is like, it comes from this belief that like when the rain is falling, you can sometimes hear this additional noise under the rain that sounds like someone who is washing beans that they've picked. Azuki beans. And the story of this episode is that there is a man who is convinced that he is being stalked by an Azuki Arai.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He hears things.
Yeah, and what happens with the Onyo is that they're able to play on that. So, like, Ogin has a puppet that she disguises as an Azuki Arai. They're able to make it rain outside. They're able to cast shadows to sort of push him further and further into admitting why he's scared of the Azuki Arai. And he reveals that he has murdered a child who was known for having this incredible talent for guessing the exact number of Azuki beans in a bowl.
Uh-huh.
The man believes that the child has kind of reincarnated as an Azuki Arai and is stalking him. But of course, there is no Azuki Arai, it's Ogin's puppets.
Yeah.
You're just staring at me. You usually have a lot more to say about child murder.
I know, even child murder isn't impressing me right now. I mean, there was a cute vampire lady or whatever she is. I appreciate that. Good job.
Ogeen.
Yeah.
Well, my notes do say Ogeen's ass is most detailed thing in episode.
Truly, yes. Now, you wanted to say something about sublimation. What was that about?
Yes, so back when I thought you would have more things to say about this, I thought, oh, hey, the guy who wrote this is really into the concept of sublimation, and Sin studied psych, so clearly she'll have a lot to say. And then we started recording it. I'll be real with your girl. It's boring as fuck. So I don't know if you even remember what happened. You don't even remember like the child murder. So I don't know if you picked up on anything else.
I'll be straight with you.
So the idea behind the series and like what ends up being the solution essentially, there was no monster. Like they're all just crimes that a human being committed. And then the legend of the monster grows up around the crime. Not as a means of like explaining it away, but as a means of like saying, well, a human couldn't have done this.
Mm-hmm.
They come up with the story of the Willow Woman because they don't want to sort of accept that like the innkeeper is a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
They come up with the story of the Azuki Arai because they don't want to accept that someone has actually murdered a child because these things are so taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so unthinkable, so it has to be sublimated into these ghost stories and these yokai stories. And that is what the author of the novels was explicitly trying to explore with this. He wasn't trying to like, I'm going to go around and debunk ghosts. It was like, no, I'm going to look at like why do you have these ghosts and these spirits and these goblins and things that all embody like really, really taboo things that we don't want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
What a beautiful analysis, Sophie. Thank you.
Do you have any appreciation for it?
Like I said, I can't do better. I'm not going to be sitting here pretending like I can draw a voice actor, make an anime. So if I made an anime, it would be a minus 10 out of 10. So they're doing better than me.
You know, my initial plan was we would watch 3 and we'd comment on 1 each. And I thought, no, we'll just watch Requiem from the Darkness. And that's a fucking disaster, isn't it? Because this has happened. No, I'm sending you something else.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of It Can't Be Helped.
It's not, though, because what's happened is the last thing we watched, you didn't like it. And in an attempt to make this end on a high note, I've now made us record again about 2 other things in the hopes that I at least have a 33% success rate.
Well, let's see if those hopes come true today.
What would you give Requiem from the Darkness out of 10?
Oh my god, that was a 10! That was a perfect horror anime. It was intense, it was a metaphor for something else, it had good animation, and, spoilers, a monster! I loved it.
We're talking about the one we watched last week.
Oh, sorry, I got a little confused. That was shit.
What's the Curse of Kazuo Umezu?
That's the one.
Sounds like you enjoyed that?
Yeah, it was very, very good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I mean, I was a little bit skeptical when the show started, and the introduction was narrated by Edward Scissorhands without the Scissorhands.
Just Edward Hands.
Edward Hands. But it was actually really interesting. And from the start, you can tell it's good because the animation was actually good. It was like fluid. It was exciting. It was scary.
Yeah.
It was just like none of that cell shading bullshit. You know, it was good, old, solid animation.
Yeah.
And the story itself, it started with a bang. It's like a girl sitting in class, sees a new student come in who's also a girl, falls in love, and she's all confused about it. It's just like, what are these feelings? Oh my god, she must be a monster.
So, Curse of Kazuo Umezu is a 45-minute OVA, but it's 2 different stories that are sandwiched together. As you mentioned, it is introduced by Edward Normal Hands. That's actually the author. That's Kazuo Umezu.
Does he look like that?
Kind of.
Because at the end, he's just a severed head.
Yeah, and the male lead in the first story's name is Umezu-kun. Hi, Sophie here with a clarification and some sad news. In between us recording this episode and the episode being edited, Kazuo Umezu passed away at the age of 88. So if you're wondering why his death's not acknowledged in the episode, and why we talk about him as if he's still alive, that's because the episode was recorded before October 28th. We now return to the curse of Kazuo Umezu. Had you heard of Kazuo Umezu before?
I don't think so.
I was vaguely familiar with him because he wrote and illustrated this thing called, I think it's called The Cat-Eyed Boy. That's adapted into this, like, I'm going to call it an animation, but it's more like a puppet show almost, where the series is done by basically having the camera move across static images, which then have like lights behind them or like smoke blowing across them to make them kind of move. But it's not really traditional animation. It kind of looks like, if people are familiar with Clutch Cargo.
Okay.
So that's, I kind of knew who he was, but I wasn't like super familiar with him. And we'll get into like how I found Curse of Kazuo Umezu when we get to the second story.
Okay.
The first story is just called What Will the Video Camera Reveal? And that's about this girl called Masami. She's sitting in class one day, and then the teacher announces, oh, we've got a new student, and it's Rima. Her family's just come back to Japan. They've been abroad for a while, and Masami basically falls in love with Rima.
Well, yeah, she falls in love, but her reaction to it is to be in complete denial about it.
Yeah.
And then kind of just go like, oh, well, Rima must be this monster.
Yes. She falls in love with Rima. She doesn't want to admit it, and then during the night, she blacks out and she wakes up with strange marks on her neck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her grandfather mentions, yeah, actually something went in through your window last night, but I don't know what it was. And this leads to her starting to believe that Rima is a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about like the mark on the neck? Because I think that was really interesting.
It was like a wound type deal.
Yeah, the mark on the neck is interesting because you'd expect, like, if it's a vampire, you'd have two puncture marks where the fangs are. But what she actually has is it's almost like a zit.
Yeah.
Or like a wart or something. It's like a little hole in her neck that she just covers up with a plaster.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the story progresses, the hole in her neck is getting more and more sort of irritated. And it's getting larger and larger.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be one of those things where she's so like anxious and in denial that during the night she just like scratches at her throat, but it wasn't.
So the other thing about Masami and Rima's relationship is that, like, while Masami is clearly attracted to Rima, she's also very, very jealous of the fact that she thinks Rima is prettier than her.
Yeah.
And this is kind of reinforced by, like, when she's at school, all the boys kind of ignore her and cluster around Rima.
Mm-hmm.
She's sort of attracted to Rima, but she doesn't want to admit she's attracted to Rima. But at the same time, the reasons that she's attracted to Rima are reasons that she's jealous of Rima.
Mm-hmm.
You get the sense that she's just sort of like boiling over and can't control herself. And like, if she had been like, you know, scratching at her neck or something in the middle of the night, like that would kind of make sense. That like she's completely losing control and she has no way of coping with any of the things that are going on.
One way of coping with it, which was a little disturbing, is going to Rima's house and just standing outside. And then when you're caught, running away.
Yeah.
Those like stalker vibes.
Another interesting thing, like with her being in denial about being in love with Rima, is that like she goes and she confides in this boy that she's friends with, and it's like it's never even broached the idea that there's any sort of attraction there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually maybe Masami was getting a lot of attention from boys, but she's not picking up on it. She's only picking up on it when it's getting in between herself and Rima.
Yeah.
So it's this real like, oh, she's really, really sexually confused.
Yeah, yeah.
So Umezu, who I think confusingly is also the author of the story, maybe this happened to him.
Maybe.
She's like, well, if something's coming in through your bedroom window at night and you don't know what it is, we'll just set up a camcorder and we'll just record the bedroom.
Yeah, good idea.
So she goes to sleep. Same thing as usual happens. And then Umezu comes and looks at the tape. And he is absolutely horrified. And he's like, I'm just going to go now.
She's like, you know what? I'm out. Like, that's that. At first, she's like, you know what? I'm not going to watch it. And then what happens is, I think, like, the next day, I guess as she's stalking Rima, as per usual, she sees Rima being taken away by an ambulance. And she's not looking too good. She looks like frail. Her skin and hair is grayed out. And again, people in class are mentioning to Masami, like, oh, you're looking really, really good, girl. Really, really good.
Apart from the horrible bleeding wound on your neck, you're absolute skin goals. What's the secret?
Yeah, so then she's like happy about everything and she goes back home. She's like, you know what? My life is perfect. Maybe I should look at this tape and find out what happened that night.
Uh-oh!
Oh, Sophie, what happened that night?
Well, the vampire was actually Masami.
Oh my god, what a twist.
Yeah, and that wound on her neck, it's not a puncture wound that's been caused by someone biting her. It's actually a second mouth.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Blade 2, where the vampires have that, like, second mouth that opens.
Yeah!
Yes,
oh my god!
Yeah. And she has this second mouth, so basically this little hole in her neck opens up and she just has this, like, her neck becomes a second mouth that is filled with all of these teeth, and it's full of spiders.
Yeah.
And, like, it's a really, really creepy design because you just see this, like, massive mouth with this girl's head hanging off the back of it.
Oh, it was so good, yeah.
And again, like, going back to, like, the relationship between Rima and Masami, like, what she does is, like, she's got this mouth and it's really fucking vaginal looking.
Yeah.
And she's trying to shove Rima into it.
But then there's also a thing that comes out of the mouth that penetrates Rima. Oh. that was oh. But it was such a good representation of just, like, all your anxieties and worries and denial, like, lashing out. Oh my god.
Yeah. And then Umezu has his camera, and she scares him. He falls out of a building and dies, and the camera breaks.
Yeah, so nobody can ever know she's a vampire. What did the camera actually record?
I think it records the transformation.
Okay, and then she remembers the rest. Okay, because I'm like, did she bring the camera with her? Like,
yeah, she got paranormal activity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that monster was like... And I like that because the whole thing was pretty tame. It was like a tame 15 minutes of a girl being confused about being gay. And it's like, it's okay, don't worry about it. And then boom. Actually, this thing comes out of her neck, literally penetrates and eats up another girl.
You saying it's like a tame 15 minutes with like a really intense 5 minutes? It's like the perfect length.
Yeah.
This couldn't be sustained for longer than 20 minutes. So I'm glad they didn't try to stretch this out to 45 minutes. Like it's like a single build up to one twist and then it's over. How did you feel about the second story?
Honestly, it wasn't as strong.
Yeah.
It was like pretty like regular.
I actually watched it and then I'm like, did I miss something? And I watched it again to see if there was something else going on and I'm like, not really.
No, it's just like one of those regular ghost stories with an ambiguous ending.
We're going to speed through this thing because it's really basic.
Yeah.
So a group of girls go to a haunted house. It's like the standard setup where one's like, oh, I'm on top of things. And one's like, I'm scared. We shouldn't go in here. They hear that like there was this woman in the house. There's these conflicting reports about how she died. And she's supposed to haunt the house. They go in there and they encounter her. And then their bodies fall to pieces. The ghost doesn't actually really interact with them. It's that they just start noticing that these like cuts are appearing on their bodies going around parts of their limbs. And then the cuts get deeper and deeper until they literally just fall to pieces. They almost look like a disassembled doll.
It's like somebody cut them up with a string, you know?
Yeah. Then suddenly one of them wakes up and is like, it was all a dream.
Yeah.
And then they go to school the next day and everything's fine except maybe it wasn't a dream because all the girls still have, like, scars on their bodies where they had been cut when they went to the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is actually really similar to the mysterious wound on Masami's neck. Like, you've just sort of done the same thing again, where it's like, I have weird, like, I get why it's compelling, where it's like, oh, I woke up with weird wounds on me and I don't know where they came from, but also you literally just did that.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, it was all a dream, but maybe it wasn't. Let's go back to the house again. They go back to the house, and then the girl who woke up and discovered it was all a dream finds her own corpse there. And then she's like, what happened? And then she was the ghost all along, and they all died.
And then you're like, huh, a little confused. So then Scissor
Edward Normal Hands
shows up, and he's like, ooh, did they really come back to face their fears and face the inevitable? Or was it all a fleeting dream? So he just explains it to us.
Yeah, thanks.
Good job, thank you, Edward. Edward knew it was a little confusing. Yeah, so he's like, no, it was.
It's like, well, he didn't have time to finish it properly. It's 20 minutes.
Yeah, so it was fine. The animation was good. There was some tension, but it wasn't. I don't get it. Like, I was like, okay, what does this represent? I don't know.
I feel like it's effective in the moment. A lot of what goes on in the house, to me, it feels like when Tetsuo is hallucinating in Akira, and all these like the gigantic toys are appearing and like leaking this weird fluid. It's sort of like that.
Yeah, there were some like interesting moments, you're right, yeah.
There's interesting moments. It's quite freaky. The idea that your body just starts falling apart with no explanation is also quite disturbing. But then it becomes like, it was all a dream, which is like the second worst possible way to end the story. And then it goes for the worst way to end it, which is, it was all a dream. Or was it? And then they literally have the guy who wrote the story show up and go like, well, it could be about anything. So I kind of now want to talk about like how I know about Curse of Kazuo Umezu, right? And it's this story.
Yes.
So are you familiar with an urban legend called Saki Sanobashi?
Saki Sanobashi, let's see what it looks like.
No, it doesn't look like anything.
Oh, then no, I am not.
It's not real.
Thank you, Sophie.
So Saki Sanobashi is this online urban legend that people are obsessed with, to the point where, like, even though it's clearly not real, people are trying to make it real, right? What happened was, in 2015, there was a thread that's like, yo, what's the most fucked up shit you've ever seen on the dark web? And someone's like, yeah, I was on the dark web, and I found this like really gory anime about these girls that were trapped in a bathroom.
Oh, it rings a bell.
Yeah. And it's like, I saw this really gory anime. These girls were trapped in a bathroom. They were all like screaming and going insane, and then like they all killed each other at the end. And it's like, and the scream haunts me to this day. Like, and I think it was called something like Saki Sanobashi Go for a Punch.
Mm-hmm.
And people became obsessed with tracking down like what Saki Sanobashi was, right?
Uh-huh.
And spoilers, it does not exist. But people were trying to shortlist, like, what do you think Saki Sanobashi could have been?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they suggested it could have been was actually the second part of Curse of Kazuo Umezu.
Oh.
The scene at the end where all of the girls are in the house and they're all falling to pieces and screaming. And it's like, oh, was this Saki Sanobashi? And it's like, no, but...
Well, Sophie, I got some good news for you. On September 14th, 2023, Go for a Punch, Saki Sanobashi has been released on Steam, and you can purchase it for $1.29.
Yeah, so that's essentially what ends up happening with Saki Sanobashi, is people get so obsessed with, like, searching for it that they're just like, fuck it, we're just making it.
I'll just make it.
So, someone faked being the original poster and said, like, I'm just coming here to finally admit that I made up Saki Sanobashi. And it's just...
That's amazing. We need to have an episode on Saki Sanobashi.
This is the episode. It's this one. This is the episode on Saki Sanobashi. Okay, we just talked about it, and that's all there is to say, because it doesn't fucking exist.
Well, it exists on Steam. We'll need to play the game. But yeah, this was very good. Very good, very creepy, highly recommend. And I'm saying that having watched The Terrifier 3 in the same day.
Wow.
So my expectations were high.
Is it better or worse than Terrifier 3?
I don't think anything is better than Terrifier 3 at the moment.
Okay. So, the third and final anime we watched
Yes.
was 2004's Lady Death the Motion Picture.
The time is now. We march on Lucifer!
Lady Death the Motion Picture is based on Lady Death the comic, and it took so long to produce that the company that published Lady Death initially was out of business by the time it was released.
Oh my goodness.
Tell us about Lady Death, the motion picture.
Think Berserk Light with a lady as a protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Lady Death.
To me, it was more like a slightly more violent episode of He-Man.
I found it to be like it's for adults. Kids shouldn't watch this. There's too many themes that are like going to be traumatizing to them.
Should they watch Curse of Kazuo Umezu instead?
Yeah, definitely.
So, Lady Death is a character that I am very, very familiar with, but I had never actually read a single Lady Death comic until I sat down to research this episode. She was a character who, was everywhere kind of as a character. Mid to late 90s to early 2000s. Like, if I was reading, Wizard magazine or, a gaming magazine or something, there's, a odds on there would be some Lady Death stuff in there, whether it was, Lady Death poster or Lady Death trading cards or ads for, the Lady Death comic or, Lady Death action figures or something like that. She was from a company called Chaos Comics. I'm just going to send you some other comics that Chaos Comics published, and you tell me if there's anything that you think connects them to Lady Death, okay?
Okay.
So this is Purgatory.
Okay. I don't see any resemblance yet.
They spell Purgatory, but it ends with an I. So she's like Tori, it's her name.
Oh, that's original.
It's a clever pun. Yeah. This is Chastity.
Okay. I see no resemblance, but
this is Jade.
I think you're reaching, just because they look exactly like Lady Death. All these women
it's
with battle
okay.
armor.
They don't all look exactly like Lady Death because this one's got pants, all right? So this is Bad Kitty.
Okay, Bad Kitty is my favorite one so far. I like her outfit.
Well, she didn't get a movie.
Aw, did the other ones get a movie?
No.
Why Lady Death specifically became popular as opposed to these other ladies?
She just caught on. It was shortly after Spawn became popular.
Interesting. Because I was thinking this movie has Spawn vibes, but not really.
Yeah.
That's the thing that popped in my head. Yeah.
Mystifyingly, they released several Lady Death swimsuit issues.
Oh!
Which seem redundant because her actual costume is just a bikini.
Excuse me, an armor bikini.
Lady Death the comic started in
1994.
So there's a 10-year gap, and by the release of Lady Death the movie, Chaos Comics had gone out of business.
I wonder if it was expensive to make.
Do you think it was? I mean, look at it.
Really? I thought it was fine. It was...
Yeah.
I mean, it's no curse, but it was fine. I expected worse, to be honest. It's not as good as MD Geist.
Interestingly, one of the reviews of this movie did describe it as worse than MD Geist 2. And I was thinking, yeah, that's the thing. I'm like,
it's so cute.
Actually, yeah, in our scheme of things, that's true, because To Sin, MD Geist 2 is one of the finest films ever made.
Saying
something's not as good as MD Geist 2 is kind of like saying it's a solid 7.
Yeah. I would say it's not as good as MD Geist 1, though. It just didn't. It didn't reach that. it doesn't have that, you know?
Do you want to talk a little bit about the story of Lady Death?
I think the story is that they're like in medieval times. So she's so it happens in Sweden. Her father is either king. I don't know if Sweden has kings in that time. Doesn't he own the land where
Yeah,
people
he's
live?
he's like a mercenary warlord guy.
Okay, yeah. So and he just like
Yeah.
kidnaps people from the village and says he does it for God. And then people in the village are like, maybe he's not doing a good thing. Maybe it's time for us to revolt.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that he just straight up looks like Satan might have given it away?
I feel like
So this movie is a sort of loose-ish adaptation of the First Lady Death
Mhm.
story arc, right?
yeah.
Which I actually read in preparation for this. I went to one of those
Yeah.
like read comics for free online sites, and this is one of those places where every time you clicked a button, it would launch a pop-up ad for crypto.
Yeah.
So I went through a lot, right? And the thing about like the comic Lady Death's father is like he starts off just kind of looking evil. And then later on he becomes this like demonic monster. But when they made the movie, they're using the demonic monster form as the default.
I honestly thought I missed something when I was watching it, and he's like, "I'm doing this for God," and it's like, what? Oh, all right,
It
sir.
reminds me a bit of the anime adaptation of Tomb of Dracula, where Dracula marries this lady who doesn't know he's Dracula, but he just clearly looks like Dracula. And he's got like a cape and stuff and like fangs. And then one day he just turns to her and he's like,
Dolores, there's a shameful secret about myself which I have kept hidden from you all this time.
So continue with the story of Lady Death.
Well, Lady Death's original earthly name is Hope, and she's actually the daughter of the nice Satan man who's, kidnapping the villagers. And she has a little boyfriend who's like, hey, I just finished like medical school and I'm gonna go off to do my own thing. And she's like, ooh.
Yeah.
And then I think her father is not okay with this relationship. So when he catches them together, he's like, no, you're going off to the war. You're going back to the castle. It's like the usual thing. I thought the beginning was kind of strong because it's like, oh, it's like the thing where it's like the hero goes through like some sort of a thing, struggle, conflict, and then they become a hero, right?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on what's different in the movie to the comic, which is that with the movie they have clearly pulled out like hack screenwriting 101 and just done like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing to the point where like entire scenes are essentially copy pasted from Star Wars.
Really?
Yeah, because in the Lady Death comic, like she's Lady Death. Like she just wants everything to die. She's like cursed to remain in hell until all life on Earth has perished. So she's just kind of like she's the protagonist because she's fighting Satan. So she's clearly like by default she's not the bad guy. But she's also just like cursing everyone on Earth and cursing all life and stuff. Whereas this tries to make her into like a more straightforwardly heroic character.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about this later on, but I think that actually makes it much, much more interesting.
But yeah, so her boyfriend's sent off to war. She's locked up in her Satan father's castle, and the villagers are about to attack the castle or whatever it is.
The villagers descend on the castle with burning torches and pitchforks and a battering ram, and then the guard goes,
"Come back in the morning."
Oh my god, that's so true! I forgot about that! Yeah, they're like knocking on the castle. The guard's like, what do you guys want?
we get some nice beefcake stuff here where her father has absorbed all of these souls and they're in his chest. So he has to rip his shirt off and like basically flex his pecs to get all these things to come
Yeah,
out.
that's true.
There's something for everyone in Lady Death.
But yeah, so she catches her father absorbing souls and just being
Mm-hmm.
Satan. And I don't know if she realizes he's Satan at this point, or she's in denial, or what's happening. But the villagers burst into the castle, and they're like, "Ooh, Satan, we kill you." And he's like, "I think not." And then he just like escapes.
There's a very
Like
funny
loose-
reaction from some of the villagers when it's clearly Satan. They're just like, ooh, yikes. So this is again one of the differences, right, between the comic and the movie, is that in the comic her dad isn't Satan.
Hmm.
In the comic, her dad is someone who like is trying to get powerful enough to take over hell from Satan.
Okay.
But in the movie, they just straight up make her dad into Satan.
Yeah.
So the villagers go, okay, well, Hope, your dad is Satan. We're going to burn you alive. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's okay because she's burned and then she wakes up and she's in hell.
Yeah, there we go.
My takeaway from this is like, hell doesn't actually seem that bad.
You know, I don't know. It's like, I feel there are bad parts of hell, but then there seem to be good parts in hell.
Yeah, it's just a place.
Yeah. You know, she does find a place where she belongs in hell with a bunch of other people who are like, yeah, we're trying to make hell better.
Yeah, like this again, this is another difference between this movie and the comic, whereas like in the comic, hell is like fire and brimstone everywhere and they're like slaves in a chain gang.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, I can see why this would be a bad place to be. In the movie, hell just looks like somewhere from He-Man. It's just some rocks, and there's like an evil castle in the distance, but you can just kind of like run away from stuff.
Yeah, and the bad stuff happens in the castle, so don't get caught and taken to the castle. Then you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not particularly hellish. I don't want to sound like I'm giving the writing of this movie any credit at all. Because I don't think this was intended remotely right. But
okay.
The difference between, like, Sweden under the rule of Matthias and hell under the rule of Lucifer is functionally non-existent.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's almost that bit in Demon Souls where the guy is like, I don't care whether it's the monarchy or the demons in charge, because they both do the same thing. They've done that, but I don't think they meant to do it. I think that they're just stealing bits of Star Wars.
Okay. It's an unintentional masterpiece.
Yeah, it's still an unintentional masterpiece is still a masterpiece.
There we go.
Yeah. After her dad, like, throws her out of a window, it's described as, like, she tames the nameless wolves, right? This is the part where I'm like, oh, their attempts to make her into a more straightforwardly heroic character are making this a lot weirder than I think they were intending, because despite the fact she's Lady Death, the ruler of hell, she's just really likes animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She tames the wolves and the horse later on.
Yeah, and before
Great.
that, she's friends with a rat.
Yes!
What it ends up doing is it makes the whole, like, Lady Death aspect of the story feel like it's just an affectation.
Hear me, Lucifer. Hope is dead. I have taken her place. Easy, boy.
I'm not Hope anymore, Dad. I'm Lady Death. It's not a phase. Oh my god, doggies! It's like she's trying really hard to be Lady Death, but it doesn't work.
Oh.
This also leads to, like, this sort of Rocky training montage.
Oh yeah, classic.
And throughout it, her costume is gradually changing.
She's becoming more confident.
But I feel like this needed to be, like, an actual, like, costume change montage with, like, music playing. She's coming out and she's, like, dressed as a cowgirl, and then Cremator, the blacksmith, just shaking his head like, no. It's like the Princess Diaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly like the Princess Diaries.
It's the Princess
That makes
Diaries, but she
sense,
finds out her dad is Satan. Something that the movie adds that's not in the comic, at least in the version that I read, I'm sure they add him later, is that
Yeah.
Lucifer has this, like, weird little clown guy called Pagan.
Oh,
This character is so confusing to me because he seems to literally just be able to do anything.
yeah.
Like, he can just appear anywhere he wants. He can turn into anyone. He can literally... There's a scene where Lucifer's like, "Where's my daughter?" And Pagan goes, "She's right here!" And she just appears out of a portal. He's just like, he can do anything. But he's treated like he's the comic relief incompetent villain.
I know. I had a hard time understanding what's up with that. And kind of like what his purpose is. No, it's just because physically he looks like, he's a jester, he's a joker, his affect is really like not cool. But like you said, he literally can create portals, change appearance. He steals her magical sword that's the source of all her power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, again, doing the whole, like, this is desperately trying to be Star Wars thing. Lady Death's power is tied to this sword. But then, like, when they need her to not have the sword, Pagan just shows up, turns into her gay best friend, takes the sword, and walks off. And it's like, that's all. It's just happened. This could have happened at any time.
He could have literally killed her. He could have literally done that and taken out the entire base by himself.
It's like, this is the most overpowered character imaginable, but Satan's acting like he's just annoying.
I know.
When she's sleeping, she has, like, a Lady Death nightie that she wears. Everything comes back to, like, hell doesn't seem that bad in this. Another great, the characters appear to have forgotten they're in hell moment is when Lady Death sees Asmodeus, Lord of Hell, torturing someone, and she's just like,
Why?
it's like, because you're in hell and he's the Archduke of Hell. That's why he's doing it.
Why?
Because she's like making this big deal out of being like, I'm the queen of the dead. No, my compassion is lost to me. It's like, why is everyone mean? Yeah, and then she has this confrontation with Satan that, again, like, this is just the Luke and Vader, like, confrontation scenes from Star Wars, where he's literally like, join me, daughter, and we will rule hell together. Like, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Because in the comics, she just walks up and she just kills him.
Oh.
Because you know how when they kill Asmodeus and it's got, like, desire as power written on the wall?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then later on someone's like, oh yes, in hell, desire is power. And it's like, that doesn't really make a great, what are you trying to say here? In the comic, it's not that, like, I'll resist the temptation to be evil. It's like, no, I want to be evil more than you do. And because desire is power, I win the fight. So it's the opposite. It's like she just gives in and becomes even more evil.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but in the show, it's just like, join me and we will rule the galaxy.
One thing I'm, like, still thinking about, I thought they were gonna make some sort of a commentary on, like, society or religion.
No.
No, but Sophie, when she's burned at the stake, it's like, the jester visited her the night before, being like, God won't save you.
Yeah.
But if you, like, pray to your father Satan, he will save you. He will, like, suck you into hell from the stake. And that's what happens. Like, she's burning and we can actually see her skin burn and her muscles are exposed. And she's like, okay, well, God is not saving me. So I'm going to say the Satan's prayer so that, not to be burned alive anymore. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was going to be like the struggle where it's like, well, she wants to be good and, God is good according to, like, this, like, universe and, like, but, God didn't save her at the time. Like, why? What is going on? That's kind of, like, not even addressed.
No,
like,
it literally ends with someone saying,
the presence of your purity was enough to bring hell back into alignment.
This is what I mean about it's trying to do the, like, hero's journey story, but it's set in hell. So it just ends with like, well, hell's fine now. There's some amazing digital effects in this.
The portal through hell?
The portal through hell actually looks a lot like Spawn. That was the most Spawn part of it.
Yes.
There's this scene with this digital fire in it. They have this digital flame effect. They have copied and pasted it 3 times. But they've made each one scaled slightly differently, and it looks like an irate gamer video.
You know, I had a weird flashback to an anime we watched in the past because Satan is my father or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Dengayo?
If that woman's been brainwashed by Captain Garama, then I'm a sugar-frosted donut. With cream.
Remember one of the characters was also like, by the way, this, I don't know, Satan or whoever is my dad.
Yeah. But that happened because Dengayo was like a 2.5 hour movie cut down to 45 minutes. Whereas Lady Death was designed to be this long in the first place. And my notes just say, what was the point of that?
No, but these were much better, Sophie, than your last week's recommendation. We're back on track. We're watching the good stuff again. Sophie?
Yeah.
Do the outro.
You say Sophie, do the outro. You don't go Sophie, yes, do the outro. There's no yes.
Oh.
It's just Sophie, do the outro.
I apologize. Sophie, do the outro.
That was 3 horror anime. Mm-hmm. If this works out, it'll be out on Halloween.
Ooh, spooky.
I reckon I can get it done.
Oh shit. Halloween's been postponed.
You know what I was going to suggest we watch and we didn't?
What?
The 3rd episode of Cyber City Oedo, because it's about a vampire.
Yeah.
But then I was like, we actually need to watch the whole of Oedo again.
Yes.
Because that was like a long time ago.
Hey, Benton. Don't crap your pants if you see a vampire out there.
Get lost. You wouldn't recognize a goddamn vampire if one jumped up and bit you on the end of your fucking dick.
Ah, but would you recognize me, Nostradamus the Vampire, summoned by patron ZMB Carter?
I mean, I would. I've forgotten this character existed, and he's absolutely baffling. His thing is asking quiz questions. Sorry, I'll do it again.
I, Nostradamus the Vampire, have a quiz question for you. Which 2 Dark Souls voice actors are in Cyber City Oedo? Leave your answers in the comments below.
There is no prize.